Your mama's dead, so what? You better serve my guests or you can sleep on the street, my husband laughed, a cold, jagged sound. I served the food with tears streaming down my face. My husband's boss, an older gentleman with a cane, grabbed my wrist. "Why are you crying, and why are you wearing black?" I told him. His face turned to stone. He walked up to my husband and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Everyone knew your wife's mother, except you, apparently. She was my sister. And now, let me tell you what's about to happen to your career, your house, and your sorry excuse for a life." Hello, everyone. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Enjoy the story. But to understand how heavy those words really were, we have to go back 4 hours. Zainab stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the kettle as it went cold. The call from the hospital had come exactly at noon. The doctor spoke in a dry, businesslike tone, but Zainab only remembered one word: expired. Her mother, Etta, was gone. For 4 hours, Zainab just sat on a stool, staring at a spot on the wall, until the front door slammed in the hallway. Kyrie was back. He flew into the kitchen, loosening his tie as he walked, and immediately twisted his face in disgust. The stove was empty. No smell of roast duck, no prep work done. "Are you deaf or something?" he barked instead of saying hello. "I called you this morning. Today is the day Thaddeus Vance, my new CEO, is coming over. Whether I become VP or rot in middle management depends on this dinner. Where is the duck? Where are the appetizers?" Zainab looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. She tried to speak firmly, but her voice cracked into a whisper. "Kyrie, Mama's gone. She passed away today at noon." Kyrie froze for a second. He looked at his wife, then at the empty table, and an expression of extreme annoyance crossed his face, as if his car had broken down at an inconvenient time. "Died?" he asked coldly. "Well, we all gotta go sometime. She was over 60, had a weak heart. It was expected." "Expected?" Zainab stood up. "Kyrie, that is my mother. I can't host guests today. Call them, cancel. Tell them we have a death in the family." Kyrie stepped right up to her. He was a head taller and knew how to use his height to intimidate. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her hard. "You don't seem to understand," he hissed in her face. "Vance isn't the kind of man you say no to. He's driving all the way across town to see how his potential VP lives. If you start playing the tragedy card and mess this up, I will throw you out right now onto the street." Zainab looked out the window. Beyond the glass, the February wind was howling, sweeping snow against the gray apartment complex. She had no money, no keys to her mother's apartment because she'd left them at the hospital. She had nowhere to go. "You wouldn't do that," she said quietly. "Try me," Kyrie sneered. "This is a corporate apartment leased to the firm. You are nobody here. You have 2 hours. Wash your face, put on some makeup, and make this table look like Thanksgiving, and wipe that miserable look off your face. Guests want a party, not a funeral." Zainab swallowed her tears as she chopped vegetables. Her hands were shaking, the knife slipping, but she kept cooking. Fear of her husband and a habit of submission had eaten into her deeper than she thought over 10 years of marriage. When the duck was in the oven, she went to change. Her hand reached for the bright beige dress Kyrie liked, but her fingers chose something else on their own. A strict, high-necked black dress that hit below the knees. It was her quiet rebellion, the only way to honor her mother's memory in this house of absurdity. Exactly at 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Kyrie threw the door open, spreading a fake, wide smile. "Mr. Vance, what an honor. Please come in." A tall, solemn man of about 65 walked into the entryway. He leaned on a heavy cane with a silver handle. His gaze was sharp, heavy. He looked around the cramped hallway, the cheap wallpaper, and finally rested his eyes on Kyrie. "I hope the dinner is worth dragging myself all this way," he grumbled in a deep bass voice, taking off his coat. "Oh, my wife is a culinary miracle." Kyrie pushed Zainab forward. "Meet my Zainab." Thaddeus Vance nodded at her without smiling. Zainab tried to squeeze out a greeting, but her throat seized up in a spasm. She just bowed her head and quickly retreated to the kitchen. Dinner turned into torture. Kyrie kept cracking jokes, pouring cognac for his boss, and endlessly bragging about his non-existent achievements. Zainab brought out plates, changed silverware. Tears flowed down her cheeks continuously, silently dripping onto the collar of her black dress. Kyrie noticed. When she leaned in to take an empty plate, he kicked her hard on the ankle under the table. Zainab let out a small cry, but immediately covered her mouth with her hand. "What's wrong with you, dear?" Thaddeus asked, looking up from his food. "She's just so clumsy," Kyrie interjected quickly, flashing a vicious glare at his wife. "And too sentimental. She saw a stray kitten this morning, still crying about it. Women, right, Mr. Vance?" The guest didn't answer. He was watching Zainab closely. In his eyes, there wasn't irritation, but a strange, intense curiosity. "More wine, Mr. Vance?" Zainab asked with a trembling voice, picking up the bottle. She approached the guest from the right side. Her hands were shaking so bad that the neck of the bottle clinked against the glass. She reached forward, and at that moment, the wide sleeve of her black dress slid down to her elbow. On her thin, pale wrist, an antique silver locket on a heavy chain gleamed. On the lid of the locket was an intricate engraving, 2 crossed keys, and a phoenix. Thaddeus Vance froze. His hand shot forward with unexpected speed for his age and grabbed Zainab's wrist. The wine bottle slipped from her fingers and smashed on the floor, flooding the linoleum with a red puddle. "What are you doing, you idiot?" Kyrie yelled, jumping up. "That's vintage wine." "Silence!" Thaddeus barked so loud that Kyrie plopped back down into his chair. The old man didn't let go of Zainab's hand. He pulled her closer to the light, peering at the locket. His fingers were trembling. "Where did you get this?" he asked hoarsely. "This crest? Where?" Zainab looked at him in fear. It's Mama's. She gave it to me a long time ago. Told me to keep it safe and never take it off." Thaddeus raised his eyes to hers. Now he was looking at her face, as if he were seeing a ghost. He studied the shape of her eyes, the line of her cheekbones. "What was your mother's name?" he asked quietly. Etta Griggs." "And her maiden name?" "I don't know. She never said. She told me she had no family except me." Thaddeus slowly loosened his fingers. He leaned heavily on his cane and stood up with effort. His face, usually flush with authority, had turned gray. "Etta," he whispered. "Etta May. 30 years I've been looking for her. 30 years. He turned to Zainab, and there were tears in his eyes. "Why are you in black, child? Why have you been crying all evening? Answer me." Zainab sobbed, unable to hold it in anymore. "Mama died today, at noon." A deathly silence hung in the room. You could hear the refrigerator humming. Thaddeus closed his eyes, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. Then he opened them, and a storm of rage was raging inside. He slowly turned his head toward Kyrie. Kyrie sat pale, mouth open, shifting his gaze from his boss to his wife. "Mr. Vance, I didn't know you two knew each other. She's just a—" "You forced her." Thaddeus's voice sounded like the rumble of an approaching avalanche. "Her mother died today, my own sister, and you forced her to roast a duck and serve you like a maid." "Sister?" Kyrie squeaked. "But she's just a seamstress." "She was a Vance!" Thaddeus struck the floor with his cane. "She ran away from our tyrant of a father 30 years ago to save her child. To save you, Zainab. She walked away from millions to live in peace. And you?" Thaddeus stepped toward Kyrie. Kyrie pressed himself into the back of his chair. "You are not just fired, Mr. Payton. You are finished. Tomorrow morning, no decent company in this city will even open your resume. I will personally see to it that you are sweeping parking lots for the rest of your days." Kyrie, realizing he had nothing left to lose, suddenly sneered. His face twisted with malice. "Oh, is that right? Well, both of you can go to hell. Just keep in mind, Mr. Vance, you are currently in my apartment. And you, Zainab, too. This is corporate housing provided to me by contract. Since I'm fired, I demand that unauthorized persons vacate the premises. And as for you, wifey, we'll settle this in court. Get out!" Kyrie crossed his arms triumphantly, feeling like he'd gotten the last word. Thaddeus suddenly started laughing. It was a terrifying, dry laugh. He pulled his phone from his pocket, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. "Legal department, this is Vance. Pull up the file on the Peyton apartment, 45 King Drive, Unit 12. Whose books is it on?" The voice on the phone answered clearly and loudly. "Mr. Vance, that real estate is not on the holding company's books. 5 years ago, that building was transferred to the private Vance Family Trust. According to the trust bylaws, direct heirs of the family have ownership rights." Thaddeus hung up and looked at Kyrie, who had started sliding off his chair. "You didn't live here because you're a valuable employee, Peyton. You lived here because my security team has long suspected where Etta might be. And we kept this property just in case. This apartment belongs to the trust, and the sole heir of my sister is right here." Thaddeus pointed his cane at Zainab. "So it's not you kicking us out. It is Zainab who will decide right now if you stay under the roof she owns." Kyrie shifted his gaze to his wife. For the first time in years, genuine animal fear appeared in his eyes. Zainab wiped her tears and took a step forward. "Get out," she said quietly but firmly, pointing at the door. Kyrie backed away, hit his back against the doorframe, and suddenly his face distorted. Fear was replaced by a wild, cornered rage. He lunged sideways, grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the table, and hurled it with all his might at the wall next to Thaddeus's head. Shards flew everywhere. "You're the ones getting out!" he screeched, his voice cracking into a falsetto. "This is my house. I'm registered here. Just try and touch me!" He dashed into the hallway, and before Thaddeus could intercept him with the cane, slammed the heavy metal door right in their faces. One lock clicked, then the second, and the chain rattled. "I'm calling the police!" His muffled scream came from behind the door. "Hello, 911? Get here immediately. 45 King Drive. My wife got drunk, brought some thug over. They're breaking furniture, threatening to kill me. She's having a psychotic episode. She's unstable." Zainab stood on the landing, staring at the closed door of her own apartment. She heard her husband continue to lie hysterically into the phone, describing her non-existent drunkenness and aggression. "We need to break the door down." Thaddeus gripped the handle of his cane until his knuckles turned white. "I'll call my security." "No." Zainab shook her head. She had no strength left to fight. "The police will believe him. He knows how to be convincing. And look at me, crying in a stranger's apartment, on paper. They'll take us to the precinct until they sort it out. I don't want to spend the night of Mama's death in a holding cell." Thaddeus sighed heavily, admitting she was right. He draped his cashmere coat over her shoulders since her things were still inside. "Let's go. You can't stay here." They drove in silence. The city outside the window was drowning in wet snow, turning into blurred spots of light. Thaddeus's car was huge, warm, smelling of expensive leather, but Zainab was shivering with chills. She thought about Mama, about how her body was lying somewhere in a cold morgue, while her daughter was driving into the unknown with a man she was seeing for the first time. Thaddeus's home turned out to be not just a house, but a real estate in a gated community in the suburbs. Inside, it was quiet and empty. He led her into a massive living room where logs were already crackling in the fireplace and poured hot tea. "Why did she run?" Zainab asked, staring at the fire. "If you all are so rich, why did we live counting pennies?" Thaddeus sat in the armchair opposite. He looked like a tired old man, the mask of the formidable boss having slipped off. "Our father was a terrible man, Zainab. He built an empire on bones. To him, people were resources and family was an asset. He wanted to marry Etta off to a partner's son, a cruel and depraved man, to seal a merger deal. Etta begged him not to do it, but father said, 'You will do what benefits the family.'" Thaddeus rubbed his face with his palms. That night she vanished, took only a small bag and that locket. She changed her name, her documents, cut all ties. I looked for her, hired detectives, checked databases. But she was smart. She knew how to hide. She chose poverty over a golden cage. She was afraid father would find her and take you away, or that I would become just like him. And did you? Zainab asked quietly. I tried not to be, he answered hollowly, but business requires hardness. Now that I've found you, everything I have is yours. Money, connections, lawyers. We will crush your husband. We will get the apartment back. You will want for nothing. Zainab set the cup on the table. The clink of porcelain sounded too loud. I don't want your money, Mr. Vance, and I don't need revenge right now. I want only one thing, to bury Mama, with dignity, and then I'll decide how to live. The next 2 days passed in a fog. Thaddeus took on all expenses. He organized the service at the best funeral home in the city. Zainab barely slept, dealing with documents, choosing the casket, the wreaths. Kyrie didn't show up. He barricaded himself in the apartment, didn't answer calls, and seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. The day of the funeral was gray and windy. Not many people gathered at the cemetery, a few neighbors, a couple of Mama's former colleagues from the sewing factory. Zainab stood by the casket, looking at her mother's peaceful face. She seemed so small amidst the white satin. The pastor began to read a prayer. Zainab closed her eyes, listening to the monotone chant, when the cemetery silence was broken by the screech of brakes. A black SUV pulled up to the gates. Kyrie stepped out. He was clean-shaven, wearing an expensive suit he'd bought with money Zainab had saved for a vacation. Next to him scurried a frail little man with a leather briefcase tucked under his arm, a lawyer. Kyrie didn't look like he was grieving. He walked toward the grave with the confident stride of an owner. "Stop the ceremony!" he shouted loudly. People turned around. The pastor fell silent. Thaddeus stepped forward, blocking his path. "You dare show your face here?" he growled. "Get out before I order security to bury you in the next plot." "Easy there, Uncle," Kyrie smirked. "We're operating within the law." The lawyer immediately popped out from behind his back and opened a folder. "My client, Mr. Kyrie Payton, is the legal spouse of Zainab Griggs Payton. According to state statutes, he has equal rights in decision-making. But that is not the main point." The lawyer pulled out a paper with a notary seal. 3 years ago, Ms. Etta Griggs signed a general power of attorney to her son-in-law, granting him the right to manage all property and represent her interests in all matters, including burial arrangements. The POA is valid for another 2 years. Zainab stared at the paper, and her legs went weak. She remembered. 3 years ago, Kyrie wanted to get a car loan, but his credit was shot. He asked to put the car in her mom's name, drove them to a notary, and slid a stack of papers in front of them. "Just formalities for the bank. Sign here and here, babe. We're late," she had signed without looking. "So what?" Thaddeus looked at the document with disdain. "This doesn't give him the right to disrupt a funeral." "It does," Kyrie interjected, adjusting his tie. "As my wife's mother's legal representative, I contest the burial site. I believe this cemetery is too expensive and inconvenient. I demand the process be halted and the body transferred to the city morgue until the dispute is settled." A murmur of horror went through the crowd. "You monster," Zainab whispered. "You want to take Mama's body? Why?" Kyrie walked right up to her. He smelled of expensive cologne and cognac. "It's very simple, Zainab," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "You are going to sign a deed of gift for your Mama's old plot of land out in Oakwood Heights, right here, on the hood of my lawyer's car, and we continue the funeral. You refuse, and your mother sits in a morgue cooler for another month while we sue each other." Zainab looked at him and didn't recognize him. This wasn't just a selfish man, this was an enemy. "The land?" she asked, confused. "That overgrown lot with the shack? It's just rotting wood and weeds. Why do you want it? It's worth nothing." Kyrie smiled smugly. "That's none of your business. Maybe I want to grow tomatoes. So, what's it going to be? You signing, or is Mama going back into the cold?" Thaddeus, standing nearby, suddenly frowned. He whipped out his phone and quickly typed something. "Oakwood Heights, Lot 34, he muttered, looking at a cadastral map. His face changed. He looked up at Kyrie, and in his eyes there wasn't just contempt, but an understanding of the scale of the villainy. "Ah, you little vulture," Thaddeus drawled. "What is it?" Zainab asked. Thaddeus turned the phone screen to her. "Zainab, he isn't planning to grow tomatoes. Yesterday, the governor signed the final plan for the new federal interstate expansion. It goes right through Oakwood Heights." Zainab still didn't understand. She looked at her husband, whose cheek had started to twitch nervously. "So?" "So," Thaddeus said harshly, staring Kyrie in the eyes. "The state is buying out these lots under eminent domain, but not for the price of a shack. The land in this zone has been rezoned for commercial use. The compensation for your lot, Zainab, will be around $1.2 million. The crowd gasped. Zainab shifted her gaze to Kyrie. He knew. He had known for months. He didn't just want a garden. He wanted to steal over $1 million from her, blackmailing her with her dead mother's body. "You knew," Zainab exhaled. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Kyrie stepped back. Red blotches covered his face. The mask of the confident master of life cracked. "So what?" he snapped. "We're family. It's community money. Sign it, or I swear this coffin goes back to the city right now." "It's going nowhere," came Thaddeus's calm voice. He didn't shout. He just made a hand signal, and two sturdy men in black overcoats who had been standing by the cars silently approached Kyrie and his lawyer. "Your document is worthless trash," Thaddeus said to the frail lawyer. "A power of attorney can be revoked in a split second. Zainab, say it." Zainab straightened up. For the first time in days, she felt not pain, but a cold, ringing rage. "I revoke the power of attorney right now in front of witnesses." Kyrie's lawyer turned pale and snapped his folder shut. "In that case, we have no legal grounds to interfere. Mr. Payton, we'd better go." "What?" Kyrie screeched. "Who are you listening to? I pay you. Do something." But Thaddeus's guards had already gently but firmly taken them by the elbows. "The service continues," Thaddeus announced loudly to the pastor. "And these gentlemen, please escort them to the gate." Kyrie tried to break free, shouting curses, yelling that he would sue everyone, but his voice was drowned out by the wind. A minute later, the black SUV peeled out and disappeared around the bend. The funeral proceeded peacefully. When the casket was lowered into the frozen earth, Zainab threw the first handful of dirt. With every thud of soil on the lid, something inside her died. The old Zainab, who was afraid to look her husband in the eye, who endured humiliation to save the family, stayed down there. "Let's go," she said to Thaddeus when it was over. "Where? To my place?" he asked. "No, home. To the apartment. I want to throw his things out right now." Together with Thaddeus and his security, they went up to the 5th floor. The door was unlocked. The lock was broken, as if someone had kicked it out from the inside in a hurry or tried to break in. Zainab